Hey, well, good morning, friends. My name is Luke, and I get to serve on the team here at Connexus. Want to give a warm welcome to those of you joining from Aurelia. I love you. And online, we're really grateful that you're joining us today. And if you're with us for the very first time, we're actually in a series, as Dan mentioned, called If You Met Jesus. And we're exploring what it might be like to have a personal encounter with Jesus through the lens of the Chosen series, through looking at depictions of people who met Jesus and for the first time and how that changed their lives. But before we get to that, I'd love to ask a question. Have you ever made the uncomfortable discovery that who you are, how you talk and behave, and what you say you value and believe is actually not in line? In fact, maybe is totally in contrast. A few years ago, I was working at a previous church, and I was a Sunday morning, and I was speaking on that particular morning. And so I was getting up, getting ready, and I realized that I was a little bit, behind schedule. And so I was just hustling to get to church on time, wanted to have everything ready to preach. No one else on the road. It's like 7:15 in the morning, and I'm flying. And suddenly I see, kind of like a shark lingering in the shallows, this blacked out cruiser. And so, like any responsible citizen, I immediately braked enthusiastically, checked that I had my seatbelt on, made sure my hands were at 10 and 2, and just kind of like nonchalantly went past that cruiser as if I was just, out for a Sunday drive, Didn't work. Did not work at all. Next thing I know, I'm pulled over, the cop's there, and I'm just thinking, man, what have I done? Here I am on the way to church. On the way to church as a pastor at that church. On the way to church as a pastor at that church to preach. On the way to church as a pastor at that church to preach and tell people how to live lives of integrity. And I am actively breaking the law. And I just remember sitting there as the police officer was coming up to my window, just thinking, please, don't let anybody who knows me is going to see me in a few hours drive by right now. Just please, no one that I don't know if I've ever felt more like a hypocrite in my entire life. Because the truth is, not only when it comes to driving a little too fast, but in other areas of my life, who I am, what I do, what I say, the kind of friend or father or husband that I am, doesn't always line up with what I value and believe. In fact, sometimes it's an exact contrast. Sometimes the way that I show up is marked more by hypocrisy than integrity. But I'm wondering if maybe you can relate. Maybe you're a parent with kids in sports, and you love them, and you cheer for them, and you support them, and you say things like, hey, you know what? Play hard, have fun. Respect the other players, respect the other coaches, respect the other refs. Just have a good time. Don't take it too seriously. And the next thing you know, the game started and a call goes against your team or against your kid, and you're like, I'm gonna fight that referee. You're like in the parking lot with a baseball bat after, you're like, come on, you're just losing your mind. It's like who you are and how you behave doesn't line up with what you value. Maybe you're showing up, whether it's for events or something like this, church today, and you're like, man, I wanna make sure that I look great. My hair looks great, my clothes look great, I'm just like everything. Maybe you're with your family, you're making sure you and your spouse and your kids just boom, boom. And everybody thinks that you're the perfect person or that you have the perfect marriage or that you have the perfect family. But if we could be a fly on the wall in your living room, we'd see that your home is marked by tension and conflict and dysfunction, that actually your family is unraveling. That who you are and what you say and do is quite different from what you value and claim to believe. What if you were in a place where you're saying, you know what, I just want everybody in my world to think that I'm disciplined and in control and I've got all my ducks in order. I've got my life together. But if people could actually see what happens in private, they'd realize there's habits of behavior or addictions that have you by the throat. And that your life is dominated by something that you just can't beat. You see, if we're really honest with ourselves, I think many of us in the room can relate to that fact that sometimes who we are, what we say and do, does not line up with what we say and believe. So what do we do? What do we do when we realize that we're living in a way that's in conflict with who we claim to be or what we know is right? Well, the Bible account that we're looking at today actually speaks directly to that, gives some incredible wisdom for what it looks like to be a people who live in a way that's marked by integrity, despite the fact that we have to be honest about areas of hypocrisy in our lives. It actually gives hope for hypocrites like me, and maybe like you too. We're going to meet somebody named Matthew, and if you've heard about the New Testament, you're like, is there a book called Matthew? Yes, you're right. That guy, that Matthew. We meet Matthew, and he's a Jew that's grown up among Jews with Jewish values and beliefs, but he's working for Rome as a tax collector. Now, you might hear that and say, like, all right, fine. But you got to understand how crazy this was, how conflict-riddled that reality would be for Matthew and his community. Because the Romans hated Jews like Matthew, and they were just like, sure, here's a guy, he can do what we want him to do, we'll make it happen. And yet, by choosing to work for Rome, Matthew was then being hated by the Jews in his life because they saw him as an extension of Rome's oppression. And tax collectors were notorious for kind of manipulating Rome to get some perks from them, and by taking too much money from the people they were taxing and keeping a cut for themselves. And so they were known for having these really lavish lifestyles. Like they had multiple houses and the nicest cars and the newest iPhone, like you name it. They were living large at the expense of their countrymen. So people hated people like Matthew. But Jesus, man, he's about to do something radical here. He's about to show up in Matthew's story and invite him, the hated tax collector, into a brand new way of life. And so in a minute, we'll be reading that passage from Matthew 9. But what I'd love for you to do is to take a second and check out the screen and see the video that captures this encounter between Matthew and Jesus.
You see the Parthian foot races last night? Darius ran like a gazelle.
Jews don't go to foot races.
Your old friend Simon himself used to run the wagering tables.
We're not friends. Next.
Okay, fine. So you did not go to the races? You stay home?
I went to see my mother.
Ugh, that would put me out, too. She asked when you're going to give her grandchildren?
She didn't ask.
I thought your parents don't speak to you.
I had questions I couldn't ask anyone else.
The mother of a son with talent like yours should be proud.
She's ashamed that I could use the talent that God gave me against God. Next.
You're good at something. You found a way to make a living doing it. It's that simple.
Must be nice to live in a world so simply
We
ordered.
live in the same world, Matthew.
Next.
Besides, what else are you going to do with a mind like yours?
Matthew. Matthew, son of Alphaeus.
Yes.
Follow me.
Me?
Yes, you.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
What are you doing?
You want me to join you?
Keep moving, street preacher.
Do you have any idea what this guy's done? Do you even know him?
Yes.
Listen, I said to... What are you doing? Where do you think you're going?
Guys, let me go.
you lost your mind? You have money. Quintus protects you. No Jew lives as good as you. You're gonna throw it all away.
Yes.
I don't get it.
You didn't get it when I chose you either.
But this is different. I'm not a tax collector.
Get used to different.
I'm glad we passed by your booth today, Matthew.
Yes.
Shall we? We have a celebration to prepare for.
You will regret this, Matthew.
What's the tablet for?
I grabbed it without thinking. You can put it back.
No, keep it. You may yet find use for it.
Where are we going?
A dinner party.
I'm not welcome at dinner parties.
Well, that's not going to be a problem tonight. You're the host.
Get used to different. Jesus shows up in Matthew's life to do something radically different in the best way. But before we get to that, let's dive into the passage we're looking at from Matthew 9 this morning. Matthew 9, verses 9 to 13. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. "Follow me and be my disciple," Jesus said to him. So Matthew got up and followed him. Later, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. But when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with such scum?" And when Jesus heard this, he said, "Healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do." Then he added, "Now go and learn the meaning of this scripture. I want you to show mercy, not offer sacrifices. For I've come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners." So if we, like Matthew, met Jesus, how might he respond to us? How might he respond knowing the hypocrisy in our lives? Well, what's beautiful is to realize that Jesus' heart for us is mirrored in his heart towards Matthew. That Jesus sees us in the same way that he sees Matthew. Let's look at verse 9 together. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. "Follow me and be my disciple," Jesus said to him. Now remember, Matthew is public enemy number one. Some scholars would say if you could think of World War II Europe and a country taken over by Nazis, and the Nazis are hunting down Jews, and suddenly a Jew helps the Nazis capture other Jews. That dynamic of betrayal, that kind of a traitor, that's the dynamic here. And yet Jesus sees beyond the broken things that Matthew's done. And he sees the person that Matthew is. And Jesus is aware that Matthew has sold out to get a good life, to make tons of money, to have whatever he wants, but that he's dissatisfied. Like he sees in Matthew this fractured sense of identity, this longing to belong, this pain from the rejection that he experiences, this reality that doesn't matter how much money you make, you can't replace faithful, loving, committed relationships. Jesus sees that. And so what would it look like if you encountered a Jesus who sees beyond your behavior, who sees your past, sees your pain, but also sees your potential? Because that's what Jesus sees in Matthew. And just as Matthew returns Jesus' gaze and actually engages with him, I wonder what it'd be like for you today to stop and say, man, if Jesus called my name, if Jesus was looking me in the eye, what would he see in my life? What would he see in my past? What would he see in my story? And what might he say to me in response? Because Jesus sees us and intends to change the way that we see the world. So Jesus sees Matthew and then gives an invitation. Look at the second part of verse 9. Jesus says, "Follow me and be my disciple," Jesus said to him. So Matthew got up and followed him. Now, if you're hearing this and you're like, man, that sounds crazy. Like, you're not wrong. Like, think about this for a moment. Like, tomorrow you're at work, wherever you work, say you're at your desk, typing away, and like round about 10 a.m., somebody comes by and it's like, "Hey, Bob, follow me." You're like, "Done, deal." Close the laptop, walk out, last time you're there. It would be like, are you nuts? Like, is Matthew making a bizarre, crazy decision? Or is he actually making a deeply calculated decision? Because think for a second, Matthew's giving up his vocation, he's giving up a great paycheck, he's giving up the security and the protection of Rome, and he's stepping out from under that. And again, he's hated by the Jewish people. His life is now way more at risk than it was when he was just sitting at that tax collector's booth. So why does Matthew take this step? Why does he say yes to following Jesus? Some of you in the room may have had the experience in life of having a front row seat to someone you know falling in love. Maybe it was a friend or a sibling. Let's say it was a guy in your life and you're watching this dude fall in love. And this dude, like, he loves summer cottage weekends with the boys. He's always down for like a spontaneous golf game. If someone's like, "The Leafs are playing," he's like, "I'm gonna be there." And suddenly he starts like skipping out on these things to be with this girl. You're like, "Oh, this is kind of crazy." And he's one of those dudes that, like, if you text him, it's going to be like 5 to 7 business days before he texts back. And if you call, it's just hopeless. You'll never hear from him. But suddenly this girl is texting and he's like responding right away. He's picking up the phone. You're like, "What? Who is this guy?" And as the relationship progresses, it kind of gets to that season where he's talking about engagement. And he's thinking about buying a teeny tiny piece of jewelry. And he's saving up like crazy. He's not like spending money on any unnecessary things. He's like eating bread and water just to like minimize his expenses so he can buy that girl that ring. Side note, I still remember, and granted I was driving an old car, but I still remember coming out of the jeweler's with the box with the engagement ring that I bought for my then girlfriend, now wife, and getting in my car and thinking, this is worth like 4 times what I paid for my car. Why do these people make these sacrifices? To get the girl. To get the girl. And if you said to that person that is in your life, or you said to me, "Hey, would you do it all over again?" The answer is absolutely. Absolutely, I'd do that to get the girl. It's so worth it for this person to be in my life and their love and their friendship and their relationship. Absolutely. But whether it's romance or family or friendship, Matthew recognizes that there's something in Jesus worth losing everything for. And so he gives up his old way of life and all that it represented to get Jesus. But like, what does Jesus get? What does Matthew get in Jesus? Well, Jesus is a miracle worker, and Matthew realizes he needs a miracle, that he's burnt all his bridges. People hate his guts. He's got hardly any meaningful community, that he wants a second chance and a new start. And he sees in Jesus somebody who can do that, who can forgive him, who can give him a second chance, who's never going to leave him or forsake him, who doesn't just see him as an advantageous relationship the way the Romans do. Somebody that deeply values and wants his life. And so Matthew gives up his old way of life to get Jesus. And when Jesus invites you to follow him, he's doing the same thing. He's inviting you to give up an old way of life to get Jesus. But here's the thing. We really love portrayals of Jesus as like really, really kind, like a wonderful grandfather, like loving, patient, generous, encouraging, forgiving. And we tend to identify these qualities in Jesus and say, yeah, I'll follow that kind of Jesus. It's like a Jesus that's just like, come here, big hug, love you. But the problem is that there's other realities in our lives, other qualities in Jesus' character that we don't want to touch. And we're actually far more preoccupied with Jesus being a passenger on the plane of our lives than the pilot. Like, if you were honest with yourself, are there any areas of your life that aren't actually surrendered to Jesus? Because here's the thing, we say things like, yeah, sure, Jesus, I'll follow you, absolutely. Love to follow you. That'd be great. That'll take some forgiveness and support any day. That's great. But time out. Whoa, my finances, Jesus, these are actually my finances. I worked hard for these. I've budgeted well this year. And so just hands off. Don't tell me what to do with my money. Don't ping my conscience when I see someone at a major intersection in Barrie who's homeless because I know I just spent money on a brand new pair of shoes I don't need. Don't do that, Jesus. This is my money. Hands off. I'll follow you, but don't tell me what to do with my money. Or, you know what, Jesus? Yeah, I would love to follow you. Absolutely, I'll follow you, Jesus. That's great. But time out. Weekends and weeknights, that's for me. My free time, Jesus, it's my time. It's me time, all right? It's not about serving in my community or volunteering at my church. And don't make me feel guilty about watching Netflix instead of being with my kids. Come on, this is my time. I'll follow you, but just don't tell me what to do with my time, Jesus. Jesus, yeah, I'll follow you. It's great. Absolutely, man. I'll follow your lead. Absolutely, 100%. But just when it comes to romance, Jesus, and who I date, who I sleep with, just hands off, Jesus. I'll follow you, but I get to make these decisions. Real relationships require wholehearted commitment, not half-hearted conditions. Why would we expect to have a thriving relationship with Jesus if we're only half-heartedly in? Because for so many of us in the room, we're guilty of living a lie because we're saying, yes, I'll follow Jesus, but you can't touch this part of my life. And we're essentially trying to say, Jesus, you can jump on the plane, but I'm the pilot. And Jesus doesn't give us that option. Jesus says, I'm flying this thing or nothing. And so when we recognize that Jesus sees you, Jesus invites you to follow him. If you're going to say yes, it's a big ask. And there's no sphere of your life that he intends to leave untouched. And he intends for you to know the wonder and the goodness of a wholehearted yes to following him. Matthew's going to help us see what this looks like spelled out in a moment. Because what's amazing is that Matthew discovers he doesn't just give up an old way of life to get Jesus, but he steps into an incredible purpose because of Jesus. Look at verse 10. Later, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. You see, Matthew doesn't just get Jesus, but he recognizes that because he has Jesus in his life, he gets to share Jesus. You see, when you encounter Jesus and you experience his forgiveness and his life transformation, what you realize is that he now invites you to join him in what he's doing to transform other people's lives, to transform communities. And so we get to become a people that share who Jesus is and what he alone can do in people's lives. And so just as Matthew is invited out of isolation and into community, and out of this self-centeredness and into selfless living, and out of this hypocrisy and into a transformed life, that's now what Matthew gets to offer other people, and it changes their lives. And that's what you get to step into when you say yes to following Jesus. And so Matthew opens up his life and his home to all kinds of people who, like him, know what it is to be outcast in society, and he says, I want you to meet Jesus. Because to say yes to Jesus' invitation to follow him actually means welcoming community and sharing the hope that you found in Jesus, creating a space where people can encounter Jesus. That's why here at Connexus, we're constantly saying we want to be the easiest church for you to invite your friends to. Why? Because we've encountered Jesus and we want others to experience him for themselves. So Matthew has been seen by Jesus. He's been invited into a brand new way of life by Jesus. And he said yes to that and yes to sharing Jesus. And if you have any life experience in living that way, you'll know that that decision makes your life better, but it doesn't make your life easier. And Matthew, in writing all this down, recording this, is really intentional to help us see why. Look at verse 11. But when the Pharisees, the religious leaders, saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with such scum? It's like, thanks, why don't you tell us what you really think about us? You know, one of the classic dysfunctional ways that unhealthy people avoid self-examination, healthy critique, and personal change is by obsessing over the faults of others. And even taking that to the next step, not just obsessing over the faults of others, but publicly critiquing and condemning. And this is for the purpose of not only focusing everyone's attention on somebody else who they think is screwing up, but elevating themselves to say, like, well, I'm not as bad as fill in the blank. And it also creates a smoke screen. If people are busy thinking that the issue and the problem is out there, they'll never stop to examine you, what's broken in your life. The Pharisees have perfected this. They've tried to create this cultural movement where there's some people who are in, who look, act, talk, think, behave just like them, and anyone else who doesn't is out. And they would be glad to use shame and condemnation to manipulate and control those people. And Jesus sees right through this and just blows it up. Because what Jesus is demonstrating here, in the midst of this dynamic where everyone's saying, here's this tax collector, what a hypocrite. Here are these religious leaders who want everyone to say, wow, you are so impressive, so polished, have the perfect image. What Jesus is showing by welcoming Matthew, the supposed hypocrite, into community with him is a concept that we need to realize is beautifully unique and so powerful to the Christian faith. And that is that the Christian faith does not teach that good people are in, good people go to heaven, and bad people are out, that bad people go to hell. It doesn't teach that. If you've thought that, so grateful we could correct it this morning. In Jesus' kingdom, the Christian faith teaches that the humble are in and the proud are out. This is because every person on some level has hypocrisy in their lives. And the difference is that Matthew knows it. And he's willing to humble himself and say, yeah, Jesus, I'm going to follow you. I'm done living my way. I'm done living for myself. I'm done trying to use all the coping strategies and manipulation that I do to try and get something from the people around you. I'm laying that down. I need you. I'm choosing to follow you. And the religious leaders are looking at Jesus saying, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to tell us that we need to change, that we need help, that we need humility? They're the proud and they're out. And here's the crazy thing. These religious leaders who are so obsessed with conveying the perfect public image, they're going to be the ones that manipulate the religious system, manipulate the Romans and then the Jewish people to falsely condemn Jesus later on in the book of Matthew to death. And what's crazy today is that if you pay any attention to unhealthy religious dynamics in the world, whether Christian or otherwise, you've probably heard stories of Christian leaders who use their status, their position, their influence, not to selflessly serve others, but try to coerce and control, and they use condemnation to try and dictate how people live their lives and to shore up support for themselves so that they can promote their own image and their own lust for power. You've probably seen that even today. And Jesus is here exposing them and saying, you're the hypocrites and you don't have the integrity to own it. Look at what Jesus says next in response to these religious leaders who have been so contemptful of Matthew and his friends. When Jesus heard this, heard them say, why would you eat with such scum? He said, healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. Then he added, now go and learn the meaning of this scripture. I want you to show mercy, not offer sacrifices. For I've come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they're sinners. You realize what Jesus is saying to you today is that if you want to confront and overcome the gap in your life between who you are and what you do and what you say you believe, it starts with the humility of saying, Jesus, I need a doctor. I need spiritual heart surgery. I need you to give me a second chance. I need you to transform my life. I'm not going to pretend that I've got it all together, that I'm the perfect person. I'm not going to obsess over trying to convince others around me that I have it all together. I need you. I need your mercy. I need your healing. Earlier on in the message, I shared about my rendezvous with a police officer on the way to church. The officer was coming up to my window, had my hands at 10 and 2, rolled down the window, and she says, good morning, sir. Are you aware that you were going 68 and a 50? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, can I please see your license and registration? And I said, yes, ma'am. And I'm just like, oh, I'm such a hypocrite. I can't believe I'm doing this. What is wrong with me, all this stuff? And I thought, you know what? This is ridiculous. I just need to own this. So I'm there, police officer, right? Uniform, gun, all the things. Got my hands there, and I just said, can I confess something to you? Which in hindsight, if you're a police officer and you pull somebody over and they ask to confess something to you, I mean, I'd be like, do you have a body in the trunk? Like, what's going on? So I said, can I confess something to you? I said, I'm a pastor. I'm on my way to the church that I work at. And I'm actually preaching today. And I feel like such a hypocrite. And I could tell behind the aviators, she was like trying not to laugh. Like she's already thinking, this is going to be a good water cooler story for later. She's like, really? I was like, really? And I was dressed to the part, so she kind of knew it. So I'm just like, yeah, I'm sorry. She steps back. She looks at my license. She looks at me. She goes, well, Pastor Crawford, I guess I'll give you a warning today. I said, whatever you think is best, ma'am. She said, please drive more responsibly in the future. I said, yes, ma'am. And as I was driving away, I thought, I did not deserve that. And about an hour later, when I was getting up on the platform to preach, I thought, I don't deserve this. I do not deserve to be in front of this community, inviting them to follow Jesus when I am such a hypocrite. But I realized something. I'd been shown mercy. And what's incredible for you to understand here is that the reason this account of Matthew is so powerful for each and every one of you is that if you met Jesus, you would encounter mercy. Because you see, Jesus doesn't just pretend like the broken things in our life, the sin in our lives, he doesn't pretend like it doesn't matter and just gloss over it. But he also doesn't obsess over it and hold it over our heads and try to motivate our behavior by condemning us and shaming us. He actually shows us a mercy and says, follow me, be my disciple, learn a brand new way of life. And Jesus can show us that mercy because ultimately he was the one who was condemned on the cross so that we could have a second chance, so that we could have new life. And he's giving us in that mercy something that only he can give us. And he's helping you and I to realize in that exchange what Matthew discovered, that Jesus is somebody worth losing everything for. That it's so worth it to lay down an old way of life. That it's so worth it to walk away from patterns of behavior that are toxic and that eat away at our souls. And to say, yes, Jesus, in you, I found someone that is greater than any other relationship. I found in you something worth losing everything for. Because Jesus sees you, all of you, and he invites you into life-transforming relationship, and out of that gives you an eternal purpose to be a part of the beautiful, life-changing work that he's doing in the world. Because he's a God of incredible, incredible mercy. So the question that you and I have to answer this morning is this. Jesus sees us. We know that. Jesus invites us to follow him. How will we respond? Jesus says, follow me, be my disciple. Will you say yes to following him? Because Jesus is somebody worth losing everything for, to gain him. Let's pray. God, thank you for the reality of Matthew's experience of encountering Jesus, laying down lifestyle, financial security, comfort, stability, to say yes to Jesus, the miracle worker, Jesus, the forgiver, Jesus, the healer, Jesus, the one who transforms our lives. God, today for some of us, we have never said yes to following you, but we want to. And it's a big ask and it's a scary ask, but we are asking today that you give us the courage to see and feel and know the infinite worth of Jesus Christ. That we would say yes to losing everything to gain Jesus. God, for some of us here, you know we've been saying for years, yeah, I'm following Jesus, but there are really distinct areas of our lives where you are not flying the plane. You're not the pilot. We are. And And you know we need to lay those down today. And so give us the humility, God, to confront the hypocrisy in our lives and saying, Jesus, I'm choosing to follow you. Help me to shrink the gap between who I am and what I know is true. Thank you that because of your mercy, we can start again. We can step into new life. We can be a people who live on mission, inviting others into the wonderful mercy of God in Jesus Christ. So help us now to follow you. It's in your mighty name we pray. Amen.